What do these insights bring to the table that can structurally change how you look at these networks and how you can operate them better?
It's all about being able to take that macro level and then figure out how to connect the dots, leveraging the right people that you did with all the people that you brought in that were the technologists to be able to get you there.
So the idea of just give everybody access to chatbot and it just creates chaos.
It's about becoming AI ready, not becoming AI native.
Today we're talking with Sriram Krishnasamy, the guy who architected FedEx's $4.5 billion structural cost reduction and then built an internal startup from scratch after managing 2,500 people.
Wait, he went from 2,500 direct reports to a 5-person team on purpose?
On purpose, because he saw something everyone else missed. The real asset at FedEx wasn't just planes and trucks. It was the data from 17 million daily shipments. He calls it a microcosm of global trade.
And he's got a strong set of opinions on how companies are getting AI wrong. His take: most CEOs think AI is a technology. Sri, however, says it's a field. And if you just hand everyone a copilot without fixing your workflows first, you're going to enhance cognitive dissonance faster than humans ever did.
That line really stuck with me. He's basically saying AI will make your organizational chaos worse faster unless you do the hard work first.
He breaks it down into what he calls the three-legged stool: business architecture, experience engineering, which I love, and then technology. Most companies flip that order completely backwards.
And his definition of frictionless, it's not about the UI. He says the Amazon app isn't the prettiest thing on his phone, but it's the one he uses the most because it nails his workflow, knows his location, remembers his preferences, anticipates mistakes.
Context and empathy over pixels. That's the whole ballgame.
He also drops this gem about AI being the first technology that you can ask questions instead of just answering them. Every other technology, the wheel, fire, the internet, helped us answer questions faster. AI might challenge human ego by asking better questions than we do.
That's either exciting or terrifying, depending on how you look at it. And I'll tell you, I've been very philosophical about AI's impact and trying to think about the future. So talking with Sri was a really fun one.
And we haven't even mentioned the vaccine distribution story, how his team built a predictive model that helped FedEx hit 99.8% service levels during the all-important COVID vaccine rollout, when efficacy was measured in hours, not days.
If you think digital transformation is about apps and dashboards, Sri's here to tell you it's actually about operating models. So let's get into it.
Sri, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. Nick, good to see you.
Now, Sri, you started your career at FedEx and then you left for a while and then you returned 14 years ago. So walk us through that journey a little bit.
So I started my career with FedEx in the Middle East, Indian subcontinent region when FedEx was at its early stages in that region. Did that for a few years, and then I had an opportunity to go work for a private equity who had raised money to invest in logistics and aviation. Seemed like a very interesting opportunity to go see what you can do from an investor side. It was a completely different perspective. Did that for 2-3 years, realized that I'm an operator. I like to roll up my sleeves and do things. Not that investing is bad, I'm just saying I'm more a doer, and had the opportunity to come back to FedEx in Europe and worked there for a few years and moved to the US 8 years back, and worked in FedEx until late 2025.
And did you see, if you think back to that experience, was there a common thread through all those experiences? Because you even had different roles while you were at FedEx along the way.
I mean, from a common thread perspective, look, I mean, FedEx is at the heart of global commerce. And if you have the opportunity to work with an entity like FedEx, you actually get a ringside view of global commerce, not just from an international trade perspective, but depth of understanding some of the key industry verticals like healthcare, like e-commerce. How is it evolving and what does it look like? I mean, I've been working with FedEx pre-Prime, right? of how packages got delivered and watched Amazon happen and watched digital commerce happen right in front of our eyes, right? I mean, the common thread is change is a constant, and the ability to anticipate what's coming next based on the signals that exist today and eliminating the noise is the art of growing an organization the scale of FedEx and continuing to innovate and succeed. And it's not, FedEx doesn't make a product that you can touch and feel, but it's part of every product that you touch and feel and use every day. So that's a great university to adapt and build your knowledge on how business works.
So at one point in your career there, you were in an SVP role with 2,500 direct reports or people under you in your organization, and you switched to start a 5-person internal startup. Tell us about that. What attracted you to that? And
One of these large supply chain companies, whether it's FedEx or UPS or any other large supply chain company, they've grown on a physical mode, right? The size and scale of the infrastructure they own, planes, ships, buildings, small trucks, scale of people who work across these massive global networks, etc. The mindset was asset was classified as physical, right? But one of the byproducts of 17 million shipments a day is data. It's a microcosm of global trade. Where is the shipment coming from? Where is it going to? What industry vertical does it belong to? And how have these patterns shifted over time, etc.? And the ability to monetize the insights from this data was an interesting transition to look at these legacy giants who've built physical scale as companies that can exist at the intersection between physical and digital. If you reimagine the identity, what would it look like? Of course, physical is incredibly important, right? I mean, until some kind of technology makes something disappear here and appear somewhere else, you're going to need physical networks. And it's not just from a supply chain point of view. If you take the world's largest retailers today, right, there is a clearly demarked physical part of it. And then there is the data digital part of it on top of it, right? I mean, the scale and size of Amazon's warehouses or Walmart's warehouses and the number of people operating supply chain, sourcing, procuring, those are physical aspects of the work. And the interface, the digital interface or the insights that you generate from data, both are incredibly important to define the identity of who these companies are, right? And the opportunity to, do an early stage startup to think about how could we look at the power of this data that this physical network generates to develop better insights for the enterprise and better insights for customers was too good an opportunity to resist. It was a challenge, right? It was an evolution from a company's mindset perspective, but it was a great opportunity. I've always chased hard things. It's the nature of how I look at what's interesting. So when that opportunity came along, I couldn't resist it. Maybe one more thing that I would add is, the quintessential entrepreneur was Frederick W. Smith, the man who founded these networks. He was as excited as I was to go on this journey, and the opportunity to work with him on this and with him having a ringside seat and being involved day to day in how we are growing Dataworks was a great learning experience.
what were you doing with the data? Who were you Were you selling that? Like, were you taking all the data that you had and selling it to somebody, or just using it to?
I was very deliberate in using the word insights and not data, right? Creating value from the insights and not data. So it wasn't really about how do we sell data. The idea was this data has tremendous latent insights in them which have never been used. How do you use the insights from that data to create value for the enterprise and for the customers was the fundamental approach. It was never to become a data aggregator, if that makes sense. It's not just how much data to collect. It's the more important questions to ask is, what do you need the data for? And are you able to articulate it with specificity, right? Not generic statements like we want to do analysis and run complex deep learning models on top of it. What problem are you trying to solve? And how can insights from data help you solve that problem faster, cheaper, or create better experiences? Right? Is the fundamental lens to how we went about acquiring data in FedEx Dataworks, right? The intent on day one was never to build this castle on the hill digital twin of FedEx's physical network. The intent was, can we have real practical problems that we can solve by leveraging the insights from the data better than, it's not that these problems are not getting solved. It's not that FedEx wasn't an optimized network, but what do these insights bring to the table that can structurally change how you look at these networks and how you can operate them better? So I'll just add that to what you said, Nick. It's, what are you trying to solve for? Right? I mean, data by itself is not a magic pill. It's your
Right.
clarity of definition of the problem you're trying to solve and what value it brings to the company or to its customers, right? And its employees, of course, which is incredibly important. That defines how you go about approaching data collection. For every large company that has the ambition of building out a digital twin of their network, whoever they are, whatever business line they're in, Pareto rule applies. 20% of the data creates 80% of the value, right? Being very conscious in saying what's enough to create the first insight that you can quickly put out in the field, test, measure the value, tweak, correct, and grow over a period of time. The value of your data lake becomes, even though you haven't captured every single bit of data that the entire organization is generating, because you chased value, right? You tend to get the right scale of data infrastructure that's needed to create the right value for employees, customers, and the company.
So, how did your operations background shape the way you think about digital insights, digital transformation? How did that kind of carry over?
Not starting in technology was kind of an advantage for me, because the first thought I had, I mean, that's not to limit technical knowledge. I had some of the best people in technologists in FedEx supporting me in building this journey. But from a setting a vision point of view, it wasn't about what's the right cloud platform, what's the right MLOps platform. That wasn't my first thought process. My first thought process is, where is the biggest value, right? I mean, I said to someone in early 2020, when I first started learning about the fact that we need a cloud subscription, is the only cloud I knew at that point of time was the one I see when I look above. I had to learn through that journey, and was supported by some unbelievably good technologists. So don't take this as a negative one. No, it should not be technology people, but it was fundamentally this value orientation that started to drive results that were tangible and people could touch and feel and use.
You know, it's really interesting. There's a parallel. It's a little bit of a tangent, but I saw a rant on LinkedIn recently that was just going off on how everyone seems to believe that it's an advantage to vibe code from not being a classical coder. And I was like, man, that's the first time I even read that concept, and the opposite. Like, I haven't seen people saying it's advantage. I've seen people saying, hey, it's empowering me to be able to code now, which is great. Everyone's like, you know, literally everyone seems to be doing that now. But no one's arguing like it's so much of an advantage. But it really made me kind of think about it. I was like, you know what? There actually kind of are advantages around it, because it's about understanding the tactical little steps that you have to take that engineers classically were like, they were locked on. They're doing great work on those tactical, tiny little steps. But it's always about that end goal, the practical, how can you apply it? How can you use it? And this is very similar to what you're talking about here, because it's all about being able to take that macro level and then figure out how to connect the dots, leveraging the right people that you did with all the people that you brought in that were the technologists to be able to get you there. So very interesting, just tangent there.
I think there's a little bit too much of a generalization that, you don't need technology practices anymore. I mean, things like SDLC process, things like security, things like availability, etc.
So, you mentioned with Dataworks and different problems to solve. What was the first problem you solved, and how did you know it was the right one?
How did I know it was the right one? It was one of the biggest problems facing humanity. So there was no question. It was just vaccine distribution. So we had built this. One of our best operations research team had built a model which was called package fingerprint. If you think about any package that moves from a zip code to a zip code, there are a series of events that need to happen on the path of that shipment so that it stays on the happy path. It delivers in the time that was promised to the customer. But the problem with these networks is, when you realize when a package has failed, at the point when it's dead on arrival, right? It arrives at an airport at Oakland Airport at 5:30 in the evening, and the delivery committed 6:30 in Los Angeles. It ain't going to make it. That's when the person says there's a problem, and you communicate to the customer, right? So people are trying to model on Excel, Access database, Visual Basic, etc. So we basically said, okay, how could we build a model that gets predictive about failure? Right? And we were on that journey. We wanted to adopt it into a more cloud-enabled platform with machine learning and deep learning, etc., and evolved it over time. And at that point is when the vaccines came out, and all networks like FedEx, UPS, etc., had a massive surge in demand for distribution of the vaccines. And it was incredibly critical that it's done on time, because the efficacy of these vaccines was very low, right? You can't leave it for a day in a facility. The next day it's gone. And all of us, if you remember the early days when vaccine was available, were clamoring for vaccines, right? People were queuing up outside hospitals and public places where there was vaccines being given to people. So it was really important that the service levels were extremely high. There were no missed, lost, or damaged packages. But it needed to be white gloved. But white gloving that many million packages, we could not have hired enough people to be able to do that and train them and make them ready to be a control tower to watch the network to see which of the packages at risk, right? And if the original paradigm of realizing something is at risk once it's dead on arrival can't apply here, right? You need to predict so that you can put corrective measures to make sure that somebody does something to retrieve that package and make sure that it reaches its destination on time. So that was the first use case we worked on. It was called package fingerprint, and FedEx has the IP for it. The result was, as FedEx has announced publicly, 99.8% service level on vaccine distribution. I mean, people look at how heroic what the effort was in creating a vaccine at such a short time that probably saved a lot of lives, but it needed to get to the place where somebody could administer that vaccine, right? And it was distributed at unprecedented scale across the world. And FedEx played a big role in it. But the key element, or one of the key elements of it, beyond the physical network and scale that FedEx had, which made this possible, was the ability to develop a model that could get predictive on risks and put mitigation measures in place as quickly as possible. So that was the first use case. We were building this model. Look, I mean, if you can predict what's going to arrive at what location at what point of time, the ability to optimize the assets, optimize resources, optimize people at the last mile in order to improve efficiency of the network is quite high, right? Whether it's a local depot that does pickup and delivery, or it's a sort facility, or it's a big hub or a ramp. If you could map the journey of a package from an origin zip code to a destination zip code, you can get quite predictive about what's going to be in which location, so you can optimize your assets. That was the intent of starting to work on package fingerprint, but then the vaccines came and we completely pivoted and said, okay, how do we put this tool in people's hands that this white glove team with minimal number of resources can have maximum impact on focusing on the exceptions and not the entire scale of distribution of vaccines.
So, Nick, I think my favorite retailer and I need therapy.
You and another website?
I've waited 5 seconds for it to load. 5. I could have gone and brewed coffee.
That's a quick coffee maker, first of all, but that sounds like a performance issue to me.
Yeah, instead of communicating, it just spun.
So you left, I'm sure. Classic abandonment issue due to latency.
Exactly. And that's why the Lowe's SRE team built site speed targets with Blue Triangle, so their users don't get ghosted by loading icons.
This is 5 steps to faster pages and fewer heartbreaks, all in the context of improved experience and improved revenue.
In fact, we turned it into a free playbook.
It's like a couples therapy for your digital experience. You know, for you and your website, Chuck.
So be sure to grab the 5-step site speed target playbook at bluetriangle.com/playbook.
Because love is patient, but users aren't. So then what you're telling me, Sri, is there's a lot more information out there than what my tracking details tell me, because it goes from Oakland to all of the sudden it's in Atlanta to all of a sudden it went to Alabama for some reason. Then it comes back to Atlanta. There's a lot more detail.
A lot more details. I mean, that was Fred's paper in Yale on the hub and spoke concept, right? Why Why doesn't the package move as the crow flies? You can't do it at scale with the right economics.
So when you, Sri, when you think about experience in architecture, you practice what you call a three-legged stool workflow. Can you walk us through what those legs are and how you think about that?
At the end of the day, one of the biggest challenges that any company is facing at this point of time, especially large corporations, Fortune 500 companies are facing at this point of time, is what does AI adoption really mean? There is no doubt in anybody's mind that AI is going to create a lot of value, right, as a technology, because it's extremely differentiated from anything else that's come before it, right? But so what? How do I use it? Is it ChatGPT? Is it Claude? Is it a co-pilot that you put on the desk of a few white-collar employees that improves their productivity? What is it? How do you adopt AI? The problem is the first thought that comes to people's mind when they think about AI is it's a technology, right? In my perspective is it's not, it's a field. It's much broader than a technology. The technology aspect of AI is just a tool, right? If that's the case, then what is the right path for a CEO, the board of a big company, or even a mid-sized company to think, how do I, it might actually counterintuitively be easier for a mid-cap company to adopt AI than a scaled enterprise, right? Because they've evolved over time as kludged on acquisitions, as different products that were created over different periods of time over the past 5 decades, 6 decades, however long this company has been. Every company has a certain demand management forum. The structure for change to be able to be successful in adopting AI is what I'm trying to articulate here, Chuck, if that makes sense, right? Every company has a demand management framework through which they prioritize what they're going to work on and why they're going to work on it and what value it delivers, right? One of the most important aspects in my mind to define with clarity is the business architecture for every aspect of demand, which is what I call workflow. If you ask CEOs the question, can you show me what is the workflow that your company follows to produce the product or service that you create at this point of time? Most likely there'll be more exceptions than rules, right? But it doesn't stop there. The second aspect is, how does your product or service fit the workflow of the customer you're selling to? Right? If not, in your own world, you've created a perfect workflow, which on an OR chart will look great. But if the customer has to change or adapt or bend their workflow and be unproductive to adopt your product or service, then you're not achieved the objective of creating workflow congruence. So the first leg of the stool, I would say, is the more you think workflows, the more you're going to be able to use AI. That's what it does, right? It's the first technology that's capable of understanding context, right? And workflow is a great framework for defining context. Here is the input, these are the processes, here is the output, right? And then if you apply AI, you start to create more value on optimizing these workflows and how you create your product or service. And if you also incorporate the lens of how it's adopted by your customers and what is their workflow. So FedEx moves a package, but FedEx moves a healthcare package. FedEx moves a t-shirt for an e-commerce company. FedEx moves an automobile spare part, right? There's context to the workflows of each of these industry verticals, right? That's the first lens, first tool, which is what I call business architecture. Great, you've built a tool to automate the workflow, you've applied AI on it, and it's capable of great insights, but the human being using it, whether it's your own employee or it's your customer's employee, if you do not understand what day in their life looks like today, a completely differentiated tool is going to create adoption barriers, right? If the perfect model that's adopted by 5% of an organization versus a model that mimics how day in the life of a person in your customer or in your workforce looks like, but it's not the 100% that you wanted on the greatest model, it has much bigger chance of success because these are self-learning mechanisms, these AI models. That's the second level, right? And that second level is what I call experience engineering, right? The first one is clear workflow definition, which is what I call business architecture. The second one is, okay, what does day in the life of a human being who's going to use this tool that you've created look like? That's experience engineering, right? And then comes technology engineering. right? It doesn't start with technology first, right? That's the third leg. That's the third leg of the stool, right? Which is, look, one of the realities of the world we live in today is especially large corporations have all grown in the world of applications. The technology landscape of most companies in the world are application centric, right? And I liken that to a wheat field, right? Every shoot is an application. It has its own kernel, it has its own infrastructure with its roots, it has its own data and systems of record, which is the stem of the wheat shoot. The objective is to progress to a point where you change technology architecture from a wheat field to a mighty oak, right? What do I mean by that? Commonization of infrastructure across the enterprise, right? That's the root. The stem of the tree or the trunk of the tree is commonized data infrastructure, right? And the branches are your commonized insight layers. I'm overgeneralizing here, but this would apply to any business: operational insights, commercial insights, financial insights, and labor insights. Right? I mean, this is what drives your P&L and your balance sheet at this point. Everything from your cash flow efficiency to your operating profit, to your product or services capability is these four broad insights. An application should be the leaves that you're able to create and deprecate really fast, and it's not expensive to do that, right? Now, this is pie in the sky, blue sky thinking. How do you go from where you are today to that? And how long is it going to take? And why do I do it, right? Which is the top of that three-legged stool, which is the governance structure you create. Every single company, every day, is looking at new demand that's coming through, right? But in the legacy world, each demand is processed for its own value. Somebody's writing the requirements for it. It goes to the technology team. They build an application or adapt an application or change an application, and then it goes out to the field. And you're constantly doing it. This is a journey through good governance to look at every demand, categorize it into the broadest, most impactful from a customer experience, which is product and experience perspective, and your operational leverage and operational efficiency perspective, and do it one demand at a time and create this framework to standardize. So every demand in an organization, if you put together a structure, an operating model that goes through this business architecture lens and standardizes one demand at a time, right? And then manages that transition through a good experience architecture lens where you're not just coming up with an intellectually brilliant model, it's adapting to what day in the life of a person looks like. I mean, look, if you look at FedEx serving a big retailer, it's not a monolithic entity. There's a supply chain manager who's consuming FedEx data. There is a product manager who's consuming FedEx data. There's an experience person in the customer who's using FedEx scan data, right? There is a merchandiser who's using this data. How do I make it contextually relevant? The same data for each one of them is what you define by experience architecture. Who am I solving this for? What is their pain points today? And what does their day in the life of look like today, right? Then you increase the chance of adoption, usage, and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you put every demand through this lens of workflow or business architecture, experience or empathy, and then start to rationalize your technology infrastructure over time, you achieve that transition from the wheat field to the mighty oak, right? It's not an impractical one thing at a time. That's what we did in FedEx's drive transformation. FedEx delivered $4 billion of structural cost reduction in 2.5 years, from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 25. It wasn't achieved by some big project. It was multitude of programs that were run through the drive governance, right? But every single one of the demand went through this process of what is the business architecture application? Are there common patterns? Does it exist elsewhere, right? Do I need, what is best in class? Then apply, okay, what am I changing? Who is the persona who's going to use it, internal or external? What am I changing? And then you start to define how you transition your technology architecture from this point to achieving that end state, if that makes sense, right? I mean, look, the most important thing for a company's ability to use AI, in my humble opinion, is how cognitive you are as an enterprise, right? Because the danger of AI is, if you just go train 20,000 people and put co-pilots on their desk, it is going to enhance cognitive dissonance that exists already much faster than humans did.
Yeah, two things strike me. One is the idea of just give everybody access to chatbot, and it just creates chaos. And we've seen a little bit of that. Nick and I have like every slide deck now doesn't look like it comes from the company because every person is doing their own slides in Claude, and they all look completely different fonts. So that's kind of stuff I noticed. And then the other thing that struck me was the whole vibe coding craze and everything follows the exact opposite of order of your structure. It starts with the technology, then it tries to figure out, well, who can use this, and then it tries to figure out what the workflow is. And by then it's such a disaster because you built something that won't work.
One of the things that I keep kind of summarizing that I feel like most people don't recognize is by collaborating with an AI, you're actually losing a bit of your voice. And you're losing your voice to the AI. So whatever the format or whatever the structure at the core, Claude or Chat or Gemini or Copilot, it's putting some of the what I call the least common denominator opinion into it, where it's for everybody. And that's bringing your voice and layering in some very generic information and making it sound super fancy. And then that's what you're putting out there. You're losing a bit of yourself, right? Like, that's how I see it.
I totally agree with you, but I'd separate it into two different contexts, Nick, which is who are we becoming as individuals, right? Is critical thinking a faculty that's that's seriously being challenged at this point in time as human beings is one point, but I mean that wouldn't be a 30 or 45-minute podcast. I can talk about that for 3 days. But leaving that aside, right? I'm talking about a corporate entity, right? At the end of the day, to reinforce the point that you're making, Nick, right? You have a commitment to your shareholders, you have a commitment to your employees, you have a commitment to your customers, and you have commitment to your community. Start from there, right? Reinforce what those commitments are, understand how you plan to deliver those commitments, and become much more have much more cognitive clarity in what you're trying to achieve, who you are, and how you're trying to achieve. Add a layer of empathy, which is who am I asking to change? And what are they used to doing for 20 years or 25 years? And then architect the available technology around it. That's the way, Nick, not to lose your identity, right? And your identity is worth something. That's why you're a Fortune 500 company or a mid-market company that's making $1 billion of revenue that people want to pay for, right? I mean, AI is not going to make these products. AI is just going to make you better at making these products.
Yeah, that's a really great way to simplify it. And it also gives me a lot of confidence that AI is not just out here to wipe away everything. It's, you know, I heard something, and I don't know if this is fully true, so I hate that I'm repeating it without actually knowing that it's fully true. But many dictionaries came out with like the new word of the year, and the word of last year was slop, 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 AI slop everywhere. So it was just a common word, and it provides some extra confidence that the main reason slop bubbled up to the top and not AI or not, you know, something like innovation is because most people are recognizing that slop is the byproduct, the negative byproduct of AI, and therefore the best people out there. Classically, they might be different people or the same people, not trying to determine that, but the best people out there are going to be the ones that know how to get rid of that slop while still leveraging AI to be more effective and apply their unique superpowers into more areas quicker. And so AI is a really interesting one, but the whole cognitive dissonance thing, I'm really gonna have to sit down with that one for a while. Like that's a really good way to boil it down.
I mean, look, it's the nature of being a scaled enterprise that has operated for a few years out there, and especially companies that started in the era pre-digital native companies, right? Where that was the norm of the game. That's how these companies grow. I mean, and they've provided incredibly valuable service to the communities that they've operated in, created employment, created services and goods and products that people have used, and they've grown. But it's not as linear as it is this, right? I mean, my point is you got to lean in on your identity. And from your identity, you look at what's the best use of AI. Don't try to change your identity to be AI. If you look at the number of mentions that CEOs have made of the word AI in their quarterly results, right? And if you plot that on a graph, pre ChatGPT launch and post ChatGPT launch, it's crazy. Everybody's saying AI right now, right? But it's about becoming AI ready, not becoming AI native. You've got a product or a service or a capability that you've created that serve the communities, shareholders, employees, and customers really well, right? How are you going to go deep into your own strengths and your own value that you've created over time, and how do you rethink it? That's one aspect. But there is another challenge that, I mean, that's something that I want to write a paper on and I'm working on, which is, yeah, every other technology before AI, I'm oversimplifying here, but just bear with me, and I'd love to hear, Chuck, Nick, your thoughts on what I'm saying as well. Every other technology that humans have had access to so far, and I don't just mean IT, I mean the wheel, I mean the fire, I mean metallurgy, I mean all of that stuff, right? Has served one purpose, which is it helped us be faster, more efficient, and quicker in answering, giving answers to questions. But we've owned the questions, right? AI is one which, once you deploy in your ecosystem, is capable of coming up with really good questions, which challenges human ego. And that's inevitable at this point of time because it has zero communication loss. It's able to process information at massive scale, and it's able to create context. It's able to operate within a context, which used to be nothing but the human domain, right? And from technology making us more productive and useful and faster and more economical and more efficient is going to be a technology that's going to help you ask better questions. Are we willing to give up that central premise of human consciousness, which is we are the ones, I mean, we're the ones who are asking, why the hell are we here? What's the meaning of life? What's out there in the universe, right? We own the questions.
Something that is similar in nature, and it's with every piece of innovation, every piece of technology, you are unintentionally giving up something. So let's talk about, say, the cell phone. The cell phone allowed us to be instantly and in our pocket connected to others. Like, forget about the internet aspect of it, just text message and phone. Immediately you can be connected. But you know what? Me and my wife are rewatching Friends, the show. And in season 1, Ross goes to China only for a single episode. But you know what he does to all of his friends? He prints out his itinerary and he hands it to them. And he says, I'll be going here, 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 here. So that's all they have. That's it. Like, could he go to a payphone and whatever and make a call? I'm sure he could have technically, but like they can't get to him in any way, shape, or form. And so the connection is the phone gave us the ability to connect at the cost of being able to disconnect. And so you're kind of talking about AI. AI is giving us the ability to be more efficient at what cost? And you're kind of implying at the cost of thinking about our own questions to answer.
The point that I was trying to make, Nick, was let me take the same context that you mentioned, right? The 20 years back, you picked your friends, right? You wanted to be in touch with them. They wanted to be in touch with you, right? You had to find a payphone, and maybe there wasn't a payphone in China, currency, reach. Today, the barriers are broken. You're able to reach them faster, right? Instantaneously. So it's a technology that made your life more productive, right? I mean, I remember the green screen email where, I had to print everything because tomorrow morning the email would go away, and we had box files of emails, right? I mean, today I have access to everything at any point of time, anywhere, on a plane. It's just made me more productive. What that does is it's creating challenges on how we utilize our time. We're losing patience because we want everything instantaneously. But AI is something that can ask you the question, is this person really your friend? Do you want to be a friend with this person? It's something that's capable of asking you questions, not just making you execute your decisions faster. It's the first context dependent or context independent, however you want to put it, technology that humans have had access to, right? I mean, how many people are actually talking to their chatbot like friends?
So, Shri, this question we ask every guest: what's one widely held belief about frictionless digital experiences that you think people get wrong that you fundamentally disagree with?
I think you said it at the top of the call, Chuck. People think that, frictionless experience is about the beauty of the UI UX, right? For me, frictionless experience is first about context and empathy. It would be great to have a beautiful UI UX, but if the context and empathy of whoever is consuming your product or service is not thought through in how you create your product or service and the experience that comes with the product or service, it doesn't matter how the skin looks like. The app that's not the prettiest on my phone is the one that I use the most. It's the Amazon app, because it nails my workflow of, am I in Dallas, am I in Memphis, am I in New York? It connects to my phone, knows my location, tells me, hey, you're making a mistake. Do you want this to go to Memphis, or do you want me to deliver it here? It understands my workflow as a human being to a fault, right? It understands my context, and it's empathetic to who I am as a person, as a single human being, that I'm perfectly fine to overlook how it compares to other apps where the beauty of the app, people have spent a lot of money in designing the skin, right? I mean, the biggest misconception to create a frictionless experience is not how cool your front end is, nor how powerful the technology is that's creating that front end. It's how well you understand context and empathy. And AI is capable of making you very, very powerful as a corporation in creating multiple vectors of context and empathy so you can customize what you offer to people.
Great conversation, Shri. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you and keep talking?
At this point of time, my email, which if you can put in this feed at this point of time.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review, and be sure to like this and follow us so that you don't miss an episode. We have a new episode every 2 weeks coming out. You can always connect with Nick and me on LinkedIn. I am at Chuck Moxley, and Nick is
At in Paladino.